put a price on justice and truth? How does 830 million rand sound? That's how much the Zondo Commission of Inquiry has cost taxpayers so far. And with extension after extension, it's hard to say how much more we'll be paying. The commission, which was set to wrap up by the end of March, has now been given until June to finish its hearings. And numbers aside, we haven't seen any prominent prosecutions yet. So is the cost justified? Well, let's unpack this with independent analyst Kaya Stole. Kaya, good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday View. I mean, this questions about how much it's costing has been asked before. And as the amount seems to be now moving towards R1 billion, people are just wondering how much more will it cost? Is it a fair price to pay in terms of its investigations?
It's a tricky one because generally, remember, Dan, with every other element of justice, no one does a tracking of the costs. So if I have an issue that I want to take to the courts in relation to public officials, for example, there isn't someone keeping tab of the bill and saying at some point in time, look, if it's costing so much, then you must stop pursuing justice. So we've never done it before. What makes this process particularly unique is that to a lot of people's eyes, it is indeed a parallel process. And why we see it as a parallel process is that this is a process that says we're going to undertake a process of inquiring and finding out the facts, but that doesn't mean that everything that we hear suddenly amounts to a prosecution the next day. So you still have the other law enforcement agencies being mandated and having to do the job of actually trying to do the prosecutions anyway. So the reason people do track the finances of this one and also ask is that it's on the basis that if this was just part of the normal law enforcement procedures, it would be impossible for us to track. The NPA doesn't tell us how much it costs to prosecute Dan or to even make inquiries out of Dan Moyane, for example. So that's the primary distinction here, in that we're able to see and track what the costs are. And the basis for people asking the question of value is that it is essentially something that is costing us in one form or another, but also the people that actually have to do the work of undertaking the prosecutions are also going to cost us. So it's that question of the double payment that intrigues people rather than just a question of numbers.
Yeah, I mean, commissions by their nature, as you say, they are there about unearthing, finding out what really happened, then making recommendations, and then the President of the Republic will decide which of those recommendations must be acted on and how. And we're still far down the line from that. So the questions are arising now, should we be spending more money on this?
I think also the important thing is that, unfortunately for the Commission, because it's been so obvious in the public arena, there are things that we all observe and we see, well, this is clearly a waste of time, because if you then schedule a hearing for a day, you line up all the staff members and all these resources only for it to take 10 minutes because the evidence leader couldn't send the right affidavit, for example, and the witness is not available, then suddenly people have got a legitimate basis for saying, wait, hold on, if these advocates are costing us 38,000 rand per day and you literally spend 10 minutes and have to abandon it because of a procedural error, it does indeed look like it's a bit of a waste in some instances. So it's simply because this is the one process that is publicized that we can all see, and there are things that are clearly unforgivable. But that doesn't mean to say that in other forms of law enforcement there aren't these elements of wastages and delays. If you look at some of the prominent cases involving politicians, they can take years. So, of course, if someone had to go and say, well, do the same tracking of the finances relating to those, you'll find that it's actually systemic in the legal process, in that there are far too many moving parts, far too many people that are involved, far too much in resources has to be expended. So it is, unfortunately, a costly exercise one way or another.
Yeah, Kaya, finally, I mean, I guess the questions of the cost will sort of be addressed and people will be satisfied about how much it has cost in the end if there will be real consequence that will come out of the Zondo Commission.
Yeah, I think the problem that we have is that people's understanding of what the consequences ought to be may differ. So some people may feel that the best consequences are the ones that amount to a restoration of some of the stolen funds. Some may believe that actually the best consequences are the ones that end up with people being behind bars. The key issue here is that some of the testimonies and some of the work streams relate to us understanding how the architecture of the state works, not necessarily us trying to recover funds that are lost, for example. So if you look at the testimony of Thandi Modise and Gwede Mantashe, it's simply an inquiry that says, well, do we have the right accountability mechanisms to hold executives to account? the answer there is not going to translate to an amount of money being paid back into the state. So we need to be able to temper the expectations when people then say, no, it's worth it because you're going to recover so much amount of money. It isn't just about the recovery of funds. There have been some good stories. Of course, McKinsey paying back the money is a good story, but that is not going to be how the legacy of this commission is going to be defined. It's really a question of what have we learned from it and how do we change the state architecture so that we do not end up having to call another commission in 10 or 15 years' time.
Thank you very much for your insights. As usual, that's independent analyst Kaya Sithole here on the Midday View. Now,